Hello everyone, this is Refresh, and this past Saturday I went to the Throne of Eldraine Prerelease for Magic the Gathering. I'm here to tell you a little bit about that experience. So when you go to the Throne of Eldraine Prerelease, you'll get one of these pre-release packs, and it has some artwork from Throne of Eldraine. It opens from the side. When you open it up, you're going to get some packs and some things inside. So what you'll get are 6 booster packs, and these are the cards representing the 6 booster packs that I got. You'll get one promo card, which you can use in the event. And in this case, I got Emry, Lurker of the Loch. You get a card divider, which you can use in your deck box. A small folded sheet that tells you a little bit about the story here, and then a little bit about how to build a sealed deck. You'll also get a arena code, which you can use to get 6 packs of Magic the Gathering. And then you'll open up your packs and hope that you get a lot of decent cards. In addition to that, inside you'll also get one spin down counter. And that should be it. Then what you do is you open up your 6 packs, you build the best 40 card deck that you can out of it, not including basic lands, which you will get separately from your store, and play a series of games against various other people who are at the pre-release, and if you do well, your store will award you prizes. So this is everything that I opened. Throne of Eldraine has a Fairy Tales meets Arthurian legend theme, and so there are a bunch of knights in this set, and nobles, and quests, and adventures, as well as a whole bunch of creatures that resemble classic fairy tales. Like the animating fairy here, for example, animates a puppet, and that's the story of Pinocchio, as you might know, and there's several other references to different fairy tales, as well as pop culture takes on fairy tales as well, and so all of that is in here, and it's hard not to miss any of that just looking at the set, and that's quite delightful. The actual set of cards that I have here, as you can see, are heavily in red and in black, and that's actually where most of my rares are and most of my best spells are. And so between red and black, I have 8 pieces of removal, either in spells or adventure creatures that can be used as removal before being turned into a creature. And so my eye was immediately on that. White didn't really have much in the way of real power, and green and blue had some interesting options in them. But overall, I felt like red and black were just the strongest. They had the most number of cards as well, giving me the most flexible deck building. And then there was another bomb that was a rare that was in Dimir in Lochmere Serpent, which I could also splash, as well as being able to play one of my 4 hybrid cost creatures in the Elite Headhunter. Now, Covetous Urge is also something that I would have considered playing as well if I had gone blue-black. It seems quite powerful. And then if I'd gone blue-green, Thunder Snapper would have been interesting as well. But overall, I just thought that these cards are kind of hard to play if you are not full in on those colors or going mono color for the most part with this light splash. And so I just kept this primarily to the red and black cards. This is the deck that I ended up building. As you can see, I followed the removal and just played every single piece of removal I had, including the Bone Crusher Giant and the Murderous Rider, in addition to the 6 other spell removals that I had. And so that is 8 pieces of removal and can deal with most of my opponent's threats, hopefully leaving me with the stronger set of creatures at the end. On the top end, I have 1 Reaper of the Night, which is one of my finishers, along with the Lochmere Serpent, which I splashed, using 1 island, and the Fabled Passage acting as a 2nd island if I need it. And if I absolutely need it, the Heraldic Banner can also act as an island as well. But the banner is here mostly to ramp me up to playing the Reaper of the Night or the Lochmere Serpent, and also to make my black creatures hit a lot harder, because as you can see, most of my creatures are more on the black side. There are a few red creatures, but primarily black, and so this will let my team hit a little harder, while also moving me towards getting to play some of these harder to cast spells, like the Elite Headhunter and Ayara, First of Locthwain. I played almost every rare that I opened, not counting Emry, and as you can see, that means that I have some pretty strong engines here, in addition to the 2-for-1s with Opportunistic Dragon, Bone Crusher Giant, Murderous Rider. We also have a way of creating engines of destruction in the Piper of the Swarm, which can create 1/1 black rat creatures, and then Ayara, First of Locthwain, which drains my opponent for 1 and gives me 1 life every single time a black creature enters the battlefield, which means that the Swarm and Ayara combo together to make an engine, and then I can sacrifice those rat creatures to take control of my opponent's creatures, which is also nice. To slow down the game a little and give me a chance to win, I also have Revenge of Ravens, which I would sideboard out if my opponent was just playing a lot of big creatures, but it does a really good job of slowing down my opponent's attacks, especially making their 1/1s invalid for attackers and really only able to be used on the defense. And then my deck also has a bit of a sacrifice sub-theme with the Malevolent Noble, Ayara, First of Eldraine, and the Elite Headhunter all being able to sacrifice my creatures for benefit, which means that it can blunt my opponent's removal and also help me to get in there for whatever last bits of damage or create problems for my opponent when they're thinking about blocking. And so that is a nice additional benefit. That's it. Try to get in there with one of the game enders here, or just be super aggressive and get in on the attacks and remove my opponent's creatures for the win, and that's basically the point of this deck. In the first match, I was set against a Esper player, and this particular player had a lot of 1/1 creatures. Fortunately, I also had Revenge of Ravens, and that pretty much shut down my opponent's primary offense. And so after a while, my opponent was taking too much damage from Revenge of Ravens and was slowly whittling his own life as he was whittling my life down. And then once I stabilized and got rid of most of his larger creatures, I had the advantage in the end and was able to go for the win for the first game. In the second game, my opponent was on the play, and this one was a nail biter because my opponent was drawing a ton of cards. He played this card called Midnight Clock, which got him to essentially shuffle his deck back together and then draw 7 cards, which put him on a massive advantage of cards. I did manage to put in a lot of damage earlier on, but once my opponent started drawing the cards, all I could do was play as defensively as possible. And then my opponent also played a Magic Mirror, and that let him draw even more cards, which put me in a pretty bad place. I did remove most of my opponent's big threats, but he kept playing a lot of smaller creatures. However, because he was drawing so many cards and could not choose not to draw those cards, I actually was able to stall my opponent out just long enough so that my opponent would draw out his deck and then die to self-mill. And so that was a lucky turn of events for me. I went into match 2 as the winner, and in my second match I played against a Gruul player. In the first game I took a mulligan to 6, and then my opponent proceeded to draw a lot more spells and answers than I did, and was able to remove most of my threats, so I was just stuck on the back foot for most of the game, and ended up losing as a result of that. In the second game, my first hand had 6 lands and 1 5-mana spell, and I took my first mulligan. My second hand had no lands. My third hand, after I took another mulligan, had no lands, so I kept my fourth hand, which had a good mix of lands and spells, while my opponent took a mulligan to 6, and I ended up with just 4 cards. However, those 4 cards ended up being the right cards, and the top of my deck was cooperating very well, so I was drawing removal, drawing creatures, and I didn't need a lot because my deck's curve was relatively low. And my opponent, on the other hand, managed to draw just a bunch of lands and not a lot of creatures, and so I removed anything that was a threat and kind of got in there aggressively and went for the win in that way. And so it was a miracle. I don't think I've ever won on a multi 4 before, but I did, and I was quite pleased that I was able to take advantage of my opponent's really slow start. For the last game, I looked at my hand and I saw 2 mountains and no swamps, and I thought that was not a great place to be. However, I did have red cards in hand as opposed to black cards in hand, so I thought maybe I could just stall out for a bit until I was able to draw my swamps and then eventually the black cards to play with them. It turns out that my opponent actually kept a 2-lander as well, but whereas I kept drawing lands and spells, my opponent actually only kept drawing spells and was eventually pinched on his mana. And I took advantage of that because my deck is a little bit more aggressive and just went in there, beat down, removed his creatures, and got in for the win, particularly using the Searing Blazes to blow up his creatures and deal damage to his face. It wasn't exactly the most noble or valorous win, but sometimes a win's a win, right? Having gone 2-0, my third match was up against a Simic player, and he was playing the food deck. In the first game, we were actually doing pretty well, trading back and forth, but my opponent, and I thought I was in a pretty good place before my opponent was able to 2-for-1 me a couple times, putting me in a bit of a bad place. His life was really low, but he managed to play a spell that gave all of his creatures +3/+3 and then blew me out. That gave him the win for the first game. In the second game, I thought I was doing alright, but my opponent went off with food, and boy did he go off with food. And so he was drawing cards every turn, getting a ton of life, and even though I was making dents in his life as the game progressed and blowing up some of his best creatures, the amount of card advantage he got off of the 2 trail of breadcrumbs that he had was so immense that even though I was at 23 life before he finally attacked me, I had exactly 1 blocker, and he had the card that gave all of his creatures +3/+3 again, and so his various many small creatures were able to attack me and then swing over the top of my 23 life and blow me up in 1 fatal swing, and that was the end of that. So go him. Amazing food engine. It didn't help that in both of these games I flooded pretty hard towards the end and wasn't able to finish my opponent because of that. But I mean, I saw a food engine go off like crazy, so I was impressed by watching my opponent crush me. With my last match, my opponent and I decided to split before we played to play with a little bit less stress. And so we were both going to get 2 magic packs at the end of the match. In the first game, we both mulliganed to 6, and then my opponent was playing a Sultai deck and had a bit of a artifacts theme, but my removal sort of took out all of his engine pieces, and from there on, like, his creatures aren't strong without his engine going, and so I was able to overwhelm him with good removal and stronger creatures, and then that was the end of the first game. In the second game, it was my opponent's turn to wreck me, and it didn't help that after a while I ran out of threats and my opponent was able to play them. I did remove a bunch of his things, but there wasn't much going on after that. He didn't get his engine together because I killed most of his engine pieces, but he drew more creatures and I didn't, and that ended that for me. Finally, in the third game, my opponent took a mulligan to 6, and this was a pretty rough game for him because I was getting massive advantage with well-timed removal, destroying all of his engine pieces again, and then overrunning him with creatures, and he actually was on the defensive the entire time, so that gave me the win, and I ended up with a record of 3-1, and we split the prizes, so I got 2 packs of Magic instead of 3, and that was my reward. I think that this set was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the cards, especially the amount of fun pop culture references that were thrown in there, and maybe that's a little bit too cloying or annoying for some of you, but I liked it, and I also really like the mechanics of the set. I think that the set is a bit on the grindier side when it comes to the type of gameplay it encourages with so many 2-for-1s in the game, and the food slowing the game down a bit because everybody can gain life here and there. I really liked opening so many foils and alternate art cards with the fancy exclusive frames to the set. That kind of made this experience a bit fun. Now, the actual pre-release itself wasn't all that special. There was nothing aside from a little bit of art that was given to the store to make this a bit more of a special experience. So there were no quests or things to check out, no bonus promos for accomplishing any tasks, no way of organizing the players against each other or anything like that. So it was a really, really bare bones pre-release. It was made most fun because the set was fun, but I kind of wish that there was at least something else to take this to another level in terms of being able to celebrate the themes and the ideas behind the set. As it was, I think that the set is a lot of fun, and that's what made the pre-release fun. I think you can have a lot of fun playing games with this in limited as of right now, and I look forward to playing some drafts soon. Let me know what you thought about my pulls, my deck, the games that I played, or your own pre-release in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.